The draught game was invented in Valencia in the year 1495 by the Jew Frances Vincent. I think this is the same author who wrote the famous book La Celestina. But this is... And now the question, who is better in draught? Harm Wiersma or Ton Sijbrands? I myself prefer Harm Wiersma because he's an all-round businessman. He has an innovative mind, always thinking of new ideas. He's traveling around the world if this is necessary. Apart from that, he is writing articles. He is speaking, if necessary, by radio or television. And also he was 5 or 6 times world champion. And Ton Sijbrands, as we know, I think one or two times. Apart from that, in 1999, Harm Wiersma became European draught champion before Sijbrands. What we can learn from these two world champions? Well, to be number one in the world, you have to fight. You have to struggle, day and night. The same I have seen in business. If you want to be the best in the world, you have to study a lot, you have to make a lot of research, you have to fight, you have to work with the important, or what is more difficult, the draught or the chess game. I think it is the draught game, and I will explain you why. In draught we have varieties played on the chessboard, I mean to say 64 squares. We also have the universal or international game that's played on 100 squares. And then we have the Canadian game that's played on a board of 144 squares. Well, as long the computer cannot win from the world champion draught on the 100 squares game, I think that draught is more difficult than chess. Because
at the end of 2017, a drafts player asked me to have translations of some of my Spanish books that deal with the history of drafts. In one book I described my drafts career by the side of Sijbrands and Wiersma, and in another book of 2 volumes I described the life of the drafts world champion Maurice Reichenbach. I decided to start with the first book and add some information about my business life in Spain. With that, school teachers become aware of the great benefit that drafts has on the mind of children and their future business possibilities. There are not many biographies of drafts players, and the books there are usually deal with the game. It is clear that I did not want to write them in Dutch, because there are many books about these players in the Netherlands and I cannot teach them anything. They know much more than I do. It is much more difficult to see Spanish texts about them, and that was the reason why I wrote books in Spanish about Amadou Kondi, Woldalby, Maurice Reichenbach, Bubasai, and others, because hopefully this way we can rescue future players in South America from obscurity. This time I will write in English so that the international players can also learn about some of the initial drafts lives of Wiersma and Sijbrands that today can be considered as history. During my many trips to Africa and South America, I saw the way of life of their inhabitants. Checkers for them is a means of getting out of isolation. In Holland we already have many African players who make a living by playing in different drafts clubs. Drafts does not serve only to earn money, but also to increase our intelligence by 25%. The game of drafts deserves a more respectful place than it has, and in this sense one should remember that drafts is more difficult than chess, as is explained in this book. Drafts players are very good at analyzing tactics, strategy, intuition, fighting spirit, performance drive, thinking ahead, long-term planning, numeracy, patience, perseverance, creativity, concentration, logical thinking, imagination, and many other good qualities. On the other hand, drafts players are very creative. They are often able to discover a draw in a hopelessly standing position by means of threats or shots. Some words about the Frenchman Dr. Diego Rodriguez, 1940 to 2015, who gave me a lot of information by phone and sent me many photos of the drafts tournaments and players in the past. He was the ambassador of drafts in the Spanish-speaking world and a man of immense generosity. I recommend this book to psychologists and all professionals who work with children as a source of knowledge and a challenge to think in new concepts.